What's wrong? How can I help you?
Please, you have to help me. It's my ex-husband. I think he's gonna kill me. He's been hitting me ever since our honeymoon, and this morning we got into a huge argument about money, and he stormed out, and he came back with a gun. I didn't let him in, but he just stood at the front porch laughing wildly and waving the gun around. Please, you have to help me.
We'll call the police, get a restraining order.
I did all of that 6 weeks ago. It hasn't stopped him.
Then we'll get him thrown in jail. Don't worry, I will help you. But I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you a lot of questions about your history before we can go any further. Have you ever been to this clinic before?
Yes, about a year ago.
Good, that'll save us some time. I'll get your chart and check your history from that. If I leave you for a few minutes, will you be okay?
Yes.
Your name is Carol Trent?
Yes.
Okay, Miss Trent. I'll be back in a jiffy.
Thank you.
Dr. Mudd?
Harmony, come in. What do you need?
I'm in the walking clinic today, and a woman came in who says she saw you about a year ago. Carol Trent, do you remember her?
Where's her chart? Oh, yes. Nice-looking woman. Very seductive man. I was very concerned about her.
Her ex-husband is pursuing her. She's afraid he'll kill her. I told her I thought this was a case for the police.
Does she seem to be in touch with reality?
She seems to be.
No sign of paranoia?
Nothing I could see.
I'd check to see whether or not she thinks anyone else is out to get her.
Right, I didn't actually do that.
I know that sometimes when a patient thinks her life is in danger and she seems credible, it's easy to get carried along.
That's just what I did. How unprofessional of me.
It's okay, Harmony. You're still learning.
I should be doing better than this by now. My internship ends next week.
A good therapist never stops learning. We all have blind spots. That's why supervision is so important, to point out those blind spots.
Thank you.
Oh, be careful about boundaries. If you get involved with throwing this guy in jail, she may be afraid to tell you things, afraid you'll jump to action every time. Let a battered woman's shelter do the reporting.
What about my ethical obligation to report imminent danger?
Sometimes you take a professional risk when it's for a patient's good.
Thank you, Dr. Mudge.
Come on in. It's time to play What's My Diagnosis? Dun, 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 dun.
Welcome, studio audience. You are present at an historic event. The very first psychiatric diagnosis sessions open to the public. You'll see real live therapists labeling real live people, and hey, this is the show that lets you, the audience, see therapists that you might someday want for your very own. Today's psychiatrists are Dr. Slip and Dr. Grip. Welcome to the show. Now let's bring out our first patient. Come on in.
Oh my God!
Welcome, Jane Doe. Now, doctors, your task is to diagnose Ms. Doe. You can ask her anything, but be sure your questions can be answered yes or no. As in many real mental health facilities, you'll have just a few minutes to assign a label. Good luck, Ms. Doe. Dr. Grip, the first question is yours.
Ms. Dill, is your problem bigger than a bed box?
Yes?
Dr. Slip, next question.
Did your mother abuse you, or was she just inappropriately seductive?
Sorry, yes, no questions only.
Isn't your mother responsible for all of your problems? Oh, yes.
Do you have any perverse sexual fantasies you'd be ashamed of telling me?
Yes. Are you attracted to women? Well, my best friend is a woman.
Answer, yes or no, please.
Well, then, yes.
Do you ever put other people's needs ahead of your own?
Hey, I am a woman.
Is that a yes?
Yes. Do you enjoy eating bananas? Yes.
Time is up! Dr. Grip, this one's yours. Record your diagnosis! Congratulations, Ms. Doe! You suffer from hysterical personality disorder. Now it's time to discover the consequences. Go ahead and spin the wheel, Ms. Doe. Congratulations, Ms. Doe! You get a complete hysterectomy and a 20-year supply of brand name tranquilizers. Thank you, Ms. Doe. And now a word from our sponsor.
This special event is brought to you by the American Psychiatric Association, the psychiatrist's friends. Remember, thanks to the APA, you have an advocate in Washington, D.C. The APA is the manufacturer of the Bible of psychiatrists, and indeed of most mental health professionals, the DSM. Never see a patient without your DSM in hand, and mark your calendars to attend the annual APA convention. It's sponsored largely by the drug companies that sell your favorite psychoactive pills. The APA convention, it's a whopper! And now, back to the show! Dun, 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 dun!
Here's our next patient. Come on in. Welcome, Sam Toe. Dr. Slip, the first question is yours this time, and good luck, Mr. Toe.
At what age did you first want to sleep with your mother?
Sorry, yes, no questions only.
Do you still want to sleep with your mother?
No?
Hey, Mon, if I gave you a set of blocks, would you rather build a tower than an enclosure?
Yeah.
Have you ever worn a flowered shirt?
No.
Mom, when you were a child, did you ever try on your big sister's ballet tutu?
Yeah.
Can you name more place kickers than emotion?
Sure, yeah.
Do you cope with stress through avoidance, denial, and physical violence?
Actually, yeah, I do.
Time is up! Dr. Slip, this one's yours. Record your diagnosis!
I'm afraid that this is an all too rare specimen. A normal, red-blooded man with no significant psychopathology. He's even outgrown the early cross-dressing behavior that one often sees in young boys, and he's healthily ashamed of it.
This is highly irregular. I don't quite know what to do about the consequences portion of the show.
Perhaps I can help. Have you ever considered becoming a psychiatrist?
Dun, 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 dun!
Good morning, Harmony. Oh, hi. Rebecca.
Yes, dear?
I don't feel well. You look a little pale. Something you ate last night? No, I didn't sleep much last night. You know, I hate goodbyes at the best of times. I'm sure we'll stay in touch. I hope so. But also, what? I'm scared. About what? About how much I don't know. If I get the associate psychologist job at Northtown, I'll be supervising other people. No one will be supervising me. If I do something wrong, it'll be entirely my responsibility. You don't need to worry. You're terrific. I've done fairly well here, and I've learned a lot from Dr. Mudge. But now, every time a patient comes in, I have to start from scratch. At 3:30 this morning, I couldn't think of one thing I knew for sure about human behavior. Things always look weakest in the middle of the night. Yeah, but I keep picturing. My first patient will walk through my office door and tell me how rotten her life is. Then what? Do what we've done here all year. Start with the questionnaire. Ask your patient if she's heard voices. If she says no, you skip to question 23. If she says yes, you go to the next question. It's all right here. All you need to give her a label. Just follow the bouncing ball and you'll know. It's how we start to help. Yeah, but I've been finding these articles. I don't know what to make of them, but I wonder if Mudge knows about this stuff. I want to bring it up today. Oh, please don't. It's supposed to be purely social. It's easy for you. You've got the job at Child Welfare. You'll get supervised at the wazoo. But if Mudge writes me a good recommendation and I get the Northtown position, it'll be a solo parachute jump. What's wrong with bringing this up in the meeting? I think it's perfect for our last group supervision session. What's wrong is this is about you not having the self-confidence you should have. That's what you should work on. Just look at your record. How many therapists have straight A records? Publish their dissertation research. Thanks, Becca, but Dr. Mudge doesn't like to be caught off guard. And if you bring up heavy stuff, he'll feel unprepared. And he's not at his best when he's uneasy. I think he's afraid he'll look foolish. Before he and Donna got married, she came back exhausted after dates with him. Said it wore her out, tiptoeing around his insecurities. The best part about my relationship with Bob was that he's so secure. He didn't need me to look up to him all the time. Of course, the worst part about our relationship was that all he ever wanted to do was analyze it. His whole life happens from here to here. Listen, there's no need to worry about these questions you're having. You know how long Dr. Mudge has been supervising interns. I'm sure he's covered everything. Honestly, Becca, you'd think it's part of social work training. Psychiatrists know best, then psychologists. That kind of thinking keeps social workers at the bottom of the totem pole. Don't you ever get fed up? I have the job I want. I don't need to make waves. Listen, why don't we keep today purely social? A celebration. I made brownies. I wish I could do that. I wish I could pretend I don't care. I got into this field because I wanted to help people who felt different. But now, on the last day of my internship, I'm not sure if I can help people more than I could 4 years ago. I don't know how to tell who's mentally ill and who's not. And if I don't, why should patients trust me?
Hey, Dr. Mons, how's it going?
Badly. Chairman just told me I can't replace Ruby with another full-time secretary. When Ruby gave notice she was leaving, he said I could hire another. Now he says that with the new budget cuts, I can only have a half-time girl. She'll work in the billing department the rest of the week. I don't know how the hell they expect me to function.
Lousy bean counter. You work so hard. You see more patients than anyone in here, and they're giving you a half-time secretary? That sucks. Hey, listen, this'll cheer you up. A patient got to our session 5 minutes late today. Said he had a hard time finding a spot in the hospital garage. So he says to me, "Doctor, do you validate parking tickets?" I said, "Oh no, I'm a strict Freudian."
Validate. That's a good one. You know, this is the best group I've supervised in many years. I'm kind of sorry to see that's coming to an end.
That's why I'm glad you chose me to be on your staff after today. I'm honored. Some of the other staff could really learn how to care for patients from you, rather than fighting to be chief.
Well, it'll be good to continue our work together. You're more fun than Harmony. Sometimes she gets so emotional she can't see straight.
3 months of dating her was all I could take. She was so intense. She's like a bulldog when she gets onto something. She hangs on and won't quit.
You really love this work, don't you?
Yeah.
It shows.
Every time I see a patient, there's the challenge of figuring out what they really feel, not just accepting what they say they feel. What could be more fascinating than understanding human behavior in all its complexity?
Well, you get started on the right path in this business and you can stop worrying.
Worrying about what?
Oh, nothing. Never mind.
You know, there have been extended periods of time where I've wondered if there's something wrong with me. Probably a sign of my early prolonged psychological adolescence. Do you ever think about...
It doesn't matter what we think. What matters is what we do. There's nothing like knowing you've helped save another human being's sanity or his life.
Oh, hey, Harm. You see this morning's newspaper? Said in there that in England, a religious group cut open an eggplant, and the seeds fall out the name of their deity. So now they've declared that this proves their God exists.
Is that insanity?
That's religion. Hey, what's that?
It's not for this meeting.
You can't hide anything from me, Harmony. What is it? It looked familiar.
Just some poems.
Poetry. I am a parcel of vain strivings tied by a chance bound together.
Thoreau. This is my letter to the world that never wrote to me.
Emily Dickinson. I sit out and look upon all sorrows of the world and upon all oppression and shame.
Walt Whitman. And Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head.
Edwin Arlington Robinson. I celebrate myself and sing myself.
Whitman again. We were very tired, we were very merry. We had gone back and forth all night on the ferry.
I don't know.
Edna St. Vincent Millay.
Okay. So what are you doing with the book?
I was looking at it last night, and I was thinking about why I switched out of English Lit into psychology. I hated how the English professors made us analyze and classify everything. I used to think that it took the poetry out of poetry. It's so ironic. Here I am, analyzing and classifying everyone.
But there's a big difference, of course. The entire edifice of science underlies what we do here.
Hey, Bob. How's Oedipus?
Great. He wakes me up every morning by licking my face. I love it.
Is he trained yet?
Completely.
That's so amazing. I thought you were putting me on again when you said you were toilet training your cat, as in to use the toilet. But my neighbor's doing the same thing with hers.
Kind of gives new meaning to the concept of anal retentive, huh?
Kind of makes you wonder what Freud would have said. Good morning, Dr. Mudgeon. How are you?
I've been better.
What's wrong?
It's my damn secretaries. I just had to fire the latest one the agency sent over.
Oh, no. What'd she do now?
I told her to transcribe a tape, one of my keynote addresses. It was about Freud's work on child sexual abuse in the family. So I get the transcript this morning for the title she's written, Floyd's Theory on Insects.
English is her second language.
Okay now, people. People. Today we bring to a termination...
Excuse me, Dr. Mudge.
First, I'd like to say, Dr. Mudge, how much I've enjoyed your teaching all year, and how much I've loved working with our little group. So I made these last night, kind of like a going-away present for the last day at school.
Ah, thank you, Becca. Very nurturant.
Thanks.
It has been wonderful being together this year, and I've learned a lot from you, Dr. Mudge, from all of you. But as we all know, I have some real problems with separations. So maybe this is just part of that.
What is part of that?
My fears.
Fears?
I have some questions.
Wrap-up questions?
You might not like them.
Harmony, a whole year with me and you still haven't learned that you can ask me anything?
I just don't want to upset you.
You worry too much.
Well, I was thinking last night how some of my patients just vanished after my last session with them. And some of them stopped coming even before we terminated. And I don't know what happened, if they got better or stayed better. And if they did get better, was it because of anything I did? Or did I say anything wrong to make them worse? Did I say something and he'll never know? We'll never know. I hate this. And once I leave here, what if some of them come back looking for me and I won't be here? All this disappearance, all these I don't knows.
Harmony, I'm trying to understand you, but you're rambling.
Sorry. Well, look. The only thing we know for sure that we've given them is a label, right?
Well, that's how we begin to help them.
But every time we label somebody like we know what we're doing. We act like we know they're mentally ill. Aren't we allowed to think about the implications?
It's not a question of what is allowed, Harmony. It's a question of what is important. We know normal when we see it.
Maybe you do, but I get more confused all the time. We all know this table exists. No matter what we call it, we can feel its shape. But normality is whatever someone chooses to call it. It's not real in the way that this table is real. It's like intelligence or love.
May I have the first slide, please? Normal can be defined as usual, not out of the ordinary, as most people do.
Excuse me, Professor, question, please?
All right, what?
I read a government report that said half the population has a mental illness. If you put that together with your definition, that means those with mental illnesses are normal because they are usual. Weird.
That is not my definition. I'm laying out for you an array of possible definitions, if you allow me to proceed.
Yeah, but just one more thing. I was thinking, since most people are targets of rape, mugging, and harassment, by your definition, would violence be normal? And racism is rampant. Would that make it normal?
Please, this is a classroom, not a political arena. Moving right along. Next slide. Normal may also be defined as in touch with reality.
Professor, can I say something if it's not political, please?
All right.
I just think that this definition brings up an interesting question. Who decides what's real? I knew this lawyer in a successful firm. His wife got pregnant with twins, and when he told his law partners he wanted to work part-time after the twins were born, they told him he needed therapy. Said it was out of touch with reality for a corporate lawyer to want to be a house husband. And the firm psychologist agreed with them. What would you say about that?
It is not for me to judge, just to lay out the options. Moving right along. Last slide, please. Normality has also been defined as having the elements of our psyche, or our lives, in the right proportion, like id, ego, and superego.
But Professor, who determines the proper proportions? My friend's father's a therapist, and he said all his patients repress their impulses too much. He tells his women patients they should be more sexually open. But some of those women were sexually abused as children. So don't you think what they really need is for someone to stop treating them like sex is the most important thing in life?
May I remind you that this is an academic course, not a practical one.
Okay. But from a historical perspective, what's considered the right balance seems arbitrary. Women used to be pressured to be less sexual, and now there's pressure on us to be more. If what's considered normal can change from one decade to the next, how confident should one be about defining who's normal?
I know what normal is.
But you've never talked about that. Have you ever diagnosed a patient as normal?
Researchers on the subject of diagnosis gave the therapist descriptions of a large number of therapy patients and a large number of people who were not therapy patients.
Sometimes
Therapists assigned diagnostic labels of mental disorders to 1/4 of the non-patients.
Sometimes it seems like a race to figure out which mental disorder they have.
What's going on with you?
People come here because they're feeling depressed or frightened or confused.
This was my lecture your first week here. We're required to label people, and then we can help them. And their insurance will pay for their therapy, and we can treat them on an ongoing basis.
You know I want to help them, but I hate labeling them. I don't know, maybe this is just something I haven't worked through enough.
Like that joke you told me? 2 + 2?
What?
How do you tell the difference between a psychotic and a neurotic?
How?
The psychotic says 2 + 2 is 5, and the neurotic says 2 + 2 is 4, and I hate it.
So I'm...
You hate it.
Thanks, now I have my label.
Add persecution complex.
Great, and the treatment?
Harm. We've got to diagnose our patients in order to know how to treat them.
A recent study showed that there were only minimal relationships among the patient's problems, the way a patient was diagnosed, and the kinds of drugs that were prescribed.
So, we listen to people's problems, and sometimes we give them a label that's oh so right, and sometimes we give them a label that makes no sense. And sometimes we say the label tells us what to do, and sometimes we never mention the label again. And sometimes we say there's this great new pill I'm just dying to try. And sometimes the pills help, and sometimes they don't, and sometimes they just make it worse, and sometimes it's Prozac or Zoloft or Luvox or Holodex.
Will you stop this scattershot firing? You are beginning to try my patience.
I'm sorry.
Certainly you don't object to choosing treatments based on diagnosis. If the patient has a broken leg, you apply a cast. If the patient has an infection, you prescribe an antibiotic.
Precisely.
It makes sense for physical illness, but does it for mental illness? A broken leg is clearly a broken leg. But the way we divide up people's behaviors into disorders, well, there are so many ways it could be done. And it's not clear to me that there's a right way.
Oh, no, Harmony, that's not...
Wait, Becca. How can this be wrong when it's such a logical approach? Are you questioning the work we've done all year?
No, I'm just thinking if the way we diagnose is not valid, then when we choose treatments based on diagnoses, we're flying by the seat of our pants. If we knew blood tests were inaccurate, would we prescribe treatments based on their results?
Of course not.
So, if the DSM is not valid, the way we diagnose is not valid.
Of course it's valid. You use scientific research to develop valid tools. And this book is pure science. God, the American Psychiatric Association wrote it, published it, advertises that it's scientific. They wouldn't have done that if it weren't. Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM. Very scientific. Weighs a ton.
Yes, and they list each criteria each patient has to get to meet each diagnosis.
That doesn't make it science.
Well, sure as heck can't be fiction. Listen, Harmony, it's been so carefully done.
Right. I know, it's the Bible. Who wrote the Bible? A handful of human beings, no? But we're expected to bow down and worship diagnostic categories in order to treat somebody's list of constellations of symptoms as though they were heavenly constellations by divine decree.
We are the kings. We choose who's normal. We write decrees that'll change your life, make it worth living. We're the big G's. We write the labels. When we decide what is wrong with you, we make our living. You challenge us, and you'll regret it. So put yourself in our big strong hands, you're gonna love us.
Have you finished your presentation for the association's convention, Doctor?
Yes, I have my speech all written out. I just hope my patients aren't going to hear what I have to say about them, especially the women.
I took a whole course on the DSM in grad school, but they never told us how it's put together. And it turns out mostly just a few white American male psychiatrists wrote it.
The APA has translated the DSM into 17 languages and sold it all over the world and made millions of dollars from it. They couldn't have gotten away with it if it weren't scientific.
But they can, and they do. And so
What's wrong with white American male psychiatrists?
what's wrong is that to join the select DSM club, you have to worship their version of the truth about who's normal.
These people make up mental disorders and pretend there's research to support them. And people's lives are devastated when they're labeled with disorders that may not even exist.
And some people are helped.
Of course they are.
You can't say the authors of the DSM pretend they're supporting research when there isn't. That's slander.
Former DSM committee members have written about what really goes on.
The lies and cover-ups when the research doesn't fit what they want are so much like Watergate that I call the DSM Project Diagnosis Gate.
These accusations are pretty extreme, Harm. Aren't you being a bit hysterical?
When the APA's public affairs director was told that top DSM person had repeatedly and publicly lied about DSM research, he didn't even deny it. He said,
When people are under pressure, they sometimes leave out part of the truth.
Now, you wait just a minute,
And
young lady.
listen to this. A psychologist asked the APA to send her a tape of the DSM meeting she'd attended. She was writing a paper and didn't want to misquote anyone. He refused.
This is not the government. There's no freedom of information here.
Now, look here. You're making the APA out to be a bunch of right-wing dinosaurs, and they are not. They're the ones that decided that homosexuality was no longer an illness.
I remember, and millions of gays and lesbians were poignantly grateful and rejoiced.
We're not nuts.
We're not sluts.
APA's got us all over us.
From now on, we're just folks.
No more bottom-nose gay bashing jokes. Oh.
No more sticks.
No more stones. No more nasty words breaking our bones. Starting here, starting now.
But what those millions never knew was that the DSM kept it in the next edition of their book.
Watch as the closet door closes.
Only under ego-dystonic homosexuality.
But that means not being completely comfortable with your homosexuality. This is a homophobic society. What, so if you're gay or lesbian and you can't totally rejoice in it, you have a mental illness?
Well, it's easy to be nitpicking.
Nitpicking?
Here's the big picture. The authors of the DSM have done massive amounts of research.
Yes, and you must know about that research.
What about it?
Know what I found out? Every few years there's a new DSM published, and each time they announce it because the previous wasn't scientific.
Really?
You never told me that.
I didn't know. Are you sure that's true?
If the DSM really were scientific, at least 2 therapists using it would diagnose the same patient the same way. But their own research on that proves the numbers are pretty poor.
Patient is a 50-year-old widow who lives alone. She presents with the disabling symptom of spending inordinate amounts of time talking to her cat. When asked why she does this, she explained that her cat understands her as no human does. Now, the important question is, what diagnosis do we give her?
Obviously, this is a case of logorrheic disorder. Excessive oral admitting of verbal material. Diagnosis number 999.98 in the 12th edition of the DSM.
Oh, I beg to differ. The outstanding symptom is the abnormal effect of attachment to the animal. Clearly felinophilic disorder, probably of long-standing duration and evidently with pronounced Oedipal features. Diagnosis number 999.99.
If therapists can't even agree on what's wrong with a patient, where do you start? Do you choose a treatment based on Dr. X's diagnosis or Dr. Y's? Or do the therapists fight it out?
Dr. X, you are wrong. She has logorrheic disorder, and we need to get her on a verbal suppressant drug combined with a behavioral modification program right away.
No, Dr. Y. She's a classic case of felinophilic disorder. And will need, I should think, at least 7 years of 4 times a week psychoanalysis to uncover the undoubtedly sexual sublimational origins of her illness.
If the American Psychiatric Association had made false claims about their DSM, surely someone would have sued them for false advertising.
I don't think it enters patients' minds. You might think of suing Procter & Gamble if your bleach doesn't work, but sue the APA. Diagnostic categories aren't drugs, so the drug regulations don't cover them. They aren't treatments, so when something goes wrong, no one thinks of this. If you're depressed or vulnerable, you're not going to have the strength to file a lawsuit. But why do you constantly side with the men on the top? Their sloppiness and dishonesty wreak havoc in our patients' lives.
Why would the DSM people lie? Surely they have our patient's best interest at heart.
Hold on, Becca. Some therapists really do care, but too many are in this business for the power and the money. For them, the more categories there are in the DSM, the more people they can diagnose, the more money they can make, the more people they can control.
Bob!
I don't mean you.
Right. But listen, the current edition of the DSM lists 374 different mental disorders. I counted, and that's 77 more than the DSM they published 7 years earlier.
Wait, just a minute. 77 new mental conditions could not have sprung up in 7 years. Could they have, Dr. Mudge?
One of the miracles of modern science is the amazing rate at which new discoveries are being made. Yes, 77 new categories were discovered.
"77 new names for today's parade, and 110 or more still to come. Growing at this fast pace, DSM has changed the face of what the world calls abnormality. Everyone by us is a crazy loon. Everyone but us out of their minds. We get to judge you all, and we really have a ball calling out, there goes insanity. Medical shrinks are great because of how they work, finding pathology everywhere. In any twitch or jerk, they see mental illness lurk, for their duty they will never shirk.
Do you have no fears or frets of any kind? And do you seem as normal as pie?
Never you fear, my dear, cause the label's pen is here. We shall classify you by and by.
Dr. Mudd, we've used the DSM all year, but we've never read it cover to cover.
Because that's not how it's used. We use the parts we need.
But there's so much I never knew. For God's sake, according to that Bible, nicotine dependence is a mental illness. So is caffeine-induced sleeping disorder. So is stuttering. If you love someone and they die, and you're still sad 2 months later, you have a major depressive disorder. Did you know that? Did you?
Get a hold of yourself, Harm. This rage is irrational.
Look, I wouldn't care if they called church-going a mental disorder, as long as it didn't hurt anyone.
Listen, Harmony, people need to believe the experts have the answers. Suffering people need to believe we have the answers. I need to believe we have the answers. People have to have hope.
But false hopes? Hopes based on shifting sands?
Thank you for coming. I am Amalia Freud. Amalia Nathanson Freud. I live to be 95 years old. I wanted everyone to know that my son was the great psychoanalyst, Sigmund Freud. But behind the polite smiles, I saw the thought, this is the mother whose son discovered that all little boys want to have sex with their mothers. Discovered. Ha! And about little girls and their mothers, what did he discover? That our daughters resent us for not having had the courtesy to provide them a penis. I had 5 daughters. How do you think his words made me feel? I love my Sigmund, but this is too much. He told people most of his life that he felt like a great conqueror because he was my undisputed favorite. Ha! So he thought. The truth is, I loved all my children. How could I not? Sigmund was my firstborn. I loved my daughters too, but kept having to have more, 5 in all, until Jacob got one more son. Most of the time that he was growing up, his father, all the other children and myself had to share 3 bedrooms. He had his own room. He needed to study. He complained that his sister Anna's piano lessons were noisy when he was trying to study. We got rid of the piano. Anna and I were sad, but not angry. We understood. Maybe he had too much. And he decided what was normal. You know, he threw up his hands and shouted, "What do women want?" What's not to understand? Is it healthy to take a mother's love or a wife's love and make it seem so complicated? Normal schnormal. Oh, I realize some people need to be put away. They could hurt themselves or someone else. But it's a tough problem. You start putting people away, and somebody is going to have to choose who gets put away. Somebody is going to have to choose the rules. And somehow, it is the people most like themselves that are the normal ones, the good, the healthy, the deserving. It is the others who are derided, called dangerous, sent away. My 5 daughters, one went to New York, 3 were gassed in Auschwitz, and the last died of starvation in the camp at Theresienstadt. Thank you for listening.
Can we take a short break? I really need to go powder my nose.
Me too.
Harmony, Harmony, Harmony. You've got me worried. What's going on with you?
Nothing mysterious. I've said very clearly what's bothering me. You're worrying me. You won't listen to me.
I understand now. This is about your separation anxiety. As you face leaving here, leaving me, you're testing me.
That's not what this is about. Sure, I'm sad to leave. It's scary to leave, feeling so unsure about our work here, but...
I thought so. Fear of abandonment leading to rumination and subsequent...
That's not what this is about. It's not about you and me. It's about the people in our care. I've always listened to you respectfully, and I thought by now you'd do the same for me. I was wrong.
You always have to be right. The bright girl, top of the class.
That's not fair. I don't need you to agree with me or think I'm great, but I would like legitimate responses.
You know, you're losing all your womanliness being so hostile, so strident.
Don't you psychologize me! As of tomorrow, you have no more right to analyze what you want to think is my psyche.
Harmony, you know me better than that. I'm just trying to help you. I don't want to see you leave here like this.
When I first came here, I was lonely. I didn't know a soul. I was scared to death starting this internship, and you were very kind to me. I've trusted you.
Well, you had great potential, but you were also very needy.
I'm not your patient!
Harmony, you've said your little piece to the group now. Enough. You're always struggling. When are you going to stop? Aren't you tired of fighting?
decides if we're normal. But some of the real stories, the ones the public needs to know in case they go to one of the bad therapists, well, I worry that no one would believe them. Like a therapist I know tied his patients to a radiator and told them it was a good way to get in touch with their need to break free of their mothers.
Did you hear about the therapist who tied his patients to the radiator?
No, what about the therapist who ties his patients to the radiator?
He sure had some hot sessions.
That's a good one. Then there's the supposed feminist therapist who takes patients whose fathers raped them and tells them that they need to regress back to their pre-incest infancy days in order to get better. Then she tries to breastfeed them herself.
Did you hear about the therapist who drove her patients back to infancy?
No, what about the therapist who drove her patients back to infancy?
She sure steered them wrong.
Wow, you got a million of them.
QED.
I don't know what Mudge wants from me.
Well, at least you don't have to live with him.
Damn straight. I couldn't do what his wife does. At the 4th of July party, the only time she left his side was to refill his drink.
That's Donna. You know, when I went back to school, if I'd gotten the least bit of support from my husband, we'd still have a marriage. He treated me like social work was a disease. He could analyze my motives because he was a shrink. If I said we had a problem, it was, so one social work course and you use it against me.
So you know what it's like to feel unsupported and diminished.
Yes.
Well, then I wonder why you haven't uttered one syllable of support for me in there. All you care about is smoothing things over in your fucking brownies.
All right, yes, I'm sorry about the brownies. And no, I don't like to fight. Not with you, not with Dr. Mudge, not with anybody. Do you understand what it would take for me to disagree with him? He's an old friend and he's so smart. Do you realize how long I've been out of school? For 20 years you've been thinking, debating, writing papers, taking positions on things. This is just one more.
This most certainly is not just one more. You know what's at stake here.
All right, yeah, and I'm sorry. The timing and subject are major. But the very thought of taking a stand against someone that strong and smart, it's terrifying. The last time I did, my marriage ended. My children's father walked away. So no, I don't try to fight, and I try not to hurt anyone. Is that so wrong? Is being right oh so terrific if you tear apart relationships?
Why does it have to be a choice between making my point and keeping the friendship? Mudge is making that choice. He punishes you if you say the emperor has no clothes. And don't you see? He's making you choose between him and me.
I won't make that choice.
You just did, in there, and not just once.
You think I have no backbone?
I think you don't want to alienate the Mudges.
Why can't you and I be friends and disagree?
Why not ask Mudge that? You defend him and don't care what it does to me. Or, and this I really don't get, you protect the DSM and don't care what it does to your patients.
I do not. When I see a patient, the DSM can fly right out the window. You think I don't care? Do you know who I am?
I thought I did, but every horrible thing I beg you to look at.
That's it! That's absolutely it! You say you care about the patients, but all you talk about is the damned book, the science. You're living from here to here.
That's the language!
Play by their rules? You can't win that way!
That's the only way to get them to listen.
And are they listening? If you care about the patients, then talk about the patients.
I can't. He'll say I'm over-emotional. No boundaries. I over-identify with my patients.
You're not. And you don't. You just care.
You know what scares me? He'll say, if you're so smart, let's throw out what we've been taught to believe in. And you tell us what to put in its place. And I'll have nothing to say.
You'll find a way. We really should go back in. Are you okay?
No.
What the hell is going on with you, siding with that banshee?
I'm not siding with her. Doesn't learning require honest debate? And don't we owe our patients that?
No one in my medical school, my internship, or my residency ever considered it necessary to debate. We asked the questions and they gave us the answers.
Yes, of course they know a lot, but don't you worry about how some of the top experts use their power? How many doctors maybe knew that Reagan had Alzheimer's disease while he was in office, but concealed his mental incompetence from the people he ruled?
But they were bound by confidentiality.
Okay, so maybe they didn't push him hard enough to leave office.
Who does Harmony think she is, pushing this? You think that what I've taught her isn't good enough? Don't you see she's dangerous? She's trying to destroy the foundation of what we do.
But that...
Devil! There's a devil! The devil!
Would anyone like some coffee? Dr. Mudge, you're empty.
There's nothing to be gained from the previous line of discussion, so let's just wrap things up, shall we?
Okay, maybe we should. No, I've got more to say. I've kept a journal all my life, especially when I needed to figure something out. Early in my internship, I was so confused I wasn't even sure what my questions were. So I made written notes about some of our patients.
I was a child of the disco. I felt free and strong. I went on the pill and had sex with everyone I wanted. And then the pains came. Sharp, stabbing, jackknifing pains. A voice inside me said, "You slept around. Did you really expect to get away without paying for that?" I went to my gynecologist. He examined me and said nothing was wrong. I asked him, "How can nothing be wrong when I'm in excruciating pain?" And then he asked me, as if this was an answer to my question, "Are you under a lot of stress? Are you a worrier?" "Only about these goddamn pains," I replied. He told me to breathe deeply when the pains hit and ushered me out of his office. So for the next 3 weeks, I breathed so deeply I got dizzy. I watched a lot of comedies, ate all the Hershey Kisses I wanted. If you thought I was relaxed and happy before, you should have seen me that week. And then the pains hit again. Just as hard as ever. I went back to my gynecologist. I had an idea. Could I have some kind of infection? I mean, inside. He ran a few tests and told me, "Nothing physical is wrong with you, dear." He sent me to a psychiatrist who told me I had premenstrual mental disorder and put me on antidepressants. I got more depressed on the pills, and every month the pain came back. Six weeks ago, my gynecologist operated on me for a cyst. When he opened me up, I found masses of infection and scar tissue. Old scar tissue from infections years before. Way back when I'd asked him to check me for infections, he'd only checked for a couple. Not the one I had, the one that was causing the pain. He removed some of the scar tissue, but couldn't get a lot of it. And so now, I can never have a child.
What did you do, Harm? Choose the worst case in the hospital? This has nothing to do with anything.
Are you joking?
Why did she come here?
She tried to kill herself when she found out she couldn't have children.
A suicide attempt, a clear sign of mental disorder.
One of our colleagues told her that her pains were all in her mind. And another told her she was mentally ill. Scar tissue.
Has anyone helped her? How is she now?
Still dangerously suicidal. Bob, open that book to premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Read the criteria for it, please.
Marked affective lability, e.g., feeling suddenly sad, depressed, or angry, marked anxiety, markedly depressed mood.
Okay, stop. Who decides if the person in your office is markedly anxious or just ordinarily anxious? Who decided if she was markedly anxious? How many therapists would you trust to decide whether your anxiety is marked or normal? Check out hypoactive sexual desire disorder. Deficient sexual fantasies and deficient desire for sexual activity. How many therapists would you want to decide whether your sexual activity is normal?
Oh, blow harm.
That does leave a lot of room for interpretation. Or maybe misinterpretation, I guess, of who's crazy.
Rebecca, we never use the word crazy.
Whatever.
You know, some people did a brilliant study. They took the DSM symptoms for premenstrual mental disorder and put them on a checklist and asked 3 groups to fill out the checklist every day. The groups were women who said they had terrible PMS, women who said they had no PMS, and men.
They asked men if they had breast tenderness?
No, that's the one symptom they left out, because they didn't tell the groups why they were doing the study. Well, if women really do get mentally ill once a month, and if the DSM lists the true symptoms, then their responses should have been very different from each other. But there were virtually no differences.
And the DSM people knew about that study. They knew it proved there's no such thing as premenstrual mental illness. Not that some women don't get bloating and food cravings and maybe sometimes irritability, but that's a far cry from mental illness.
Yeah, and people don't diagnose irritable men as mentally ill.
Exactly.
So PMDD isn't real. And if it isn't real, then using it can't help her.
Or any woman.
Well, is there anything useful in the DSM, or should we just stop categorizing everyone and destroy our whole field?
You act like I'm trying to destroy something, but I'm not. I'm just saying I'm confused.
Well, that's enough Friday story hour.
Dr. Mudge, if you don't mind, I'd like to know more.
My dad was a career Marine. Ever since I can remember, he'd been telling me how glad he was to have a son who could follow in his footsteps. And I really wanted to. As soon as I turned 18, I joined up. Told him I planned to make a career of it. I did great in basic training, jumping hurdles, climbing ropes. I was tops in my unit doing push-ups. Then they told us we had to swim. I always had this fear of the water, you know? I had this premonition that I was going to die by drowning. Water snuffling up through my nose, into my lungs. I told him I couldn't do it. I begged him to let me do something else. Anything instead of swim. My drill sergeant yelled, "Sink or swim, Private!" and threw me in the deep end of the pool. I panicked. Started to sink. Looked up at him, laughing at me. And I went under. Finally, someone hauled me out and threw me a bump of cement. They discharged me for that. Sent me to one of their psychiatrists who said I had a mental illness, immature personality disorder. Dad was furious. At me, of course. Said he thought I was more of a man than that. I guess I've never really been able to be with a woman since.
Not one baby.
I just can't stop thinking. I guess he's right. I'm not a real man.
And why did he come here?
He was depressed. Never got over that rejection. I saw him in the walk-in clinic, but he seemed uncomfortable having a young woman as his therapist. So I asked Rebecca to see him.
Yes, he's my patient.
Well, he's a clear case of gender identity disorder.
I didn't think of that. It made sense to me. The way he was so upset after the way the Marines and his father treated him. I didn't think he'd have a problem with his masculinity if they hadn't said he wasn't manly enough. I thought they were the ones with the hang-ups, and when I told
You're
him
missing the internal individual problem here, the mental disorder. Here, read the definition for gender identity disorder.
persistent or reoccurrent discomfort and sense of inappropriateness with one's sex.
Next time you'll know.
But
what?
I told him some men and women think you can get scared sometimes. And that doesn't make you any less of a man. It took a while, but he started feeling better about himself, and his depression lifted.
Someone actually got better.
Yes.
Are you trying to make a point?
Yes, I am. Doesn't that prove that his disorder came from outside of him, so it wasn't a mental disorder, but a social problem?
If he was so distressed, that's a mental disorder.
No one in their right mind would call this man mentally ill. Maybe the drug companies that want to prescribe their pills to as many people as possible.
Ever notice how many research reports have little footnotes? This study was funded by one drug company or another. Hardly objective science.
That's true. And a lot of other research about treatment is pretty bad.
Research about mental disorder is the hardest research there is. It's about human behavior in all its complexity. You can't learn much about what makes someone mentally ill if you study them in a laboratory. But if you try to study them in the real world, too many factors affect people's feelings and thoughts for anyone to figure out much about what makes them tick.
All the more reason for us to think about the research and not swallow it whole. You know, all those years I was married, every August I watched my husband bring in a new wave of therapists. At first, the search for truth is important. Then being important is important. They think they see the light, but it was just rays from faces like their own. Soon, their search for truth becomes a defensive dogma.
Your husband...
Listen, why don't we just do what we know works? The best way to help most suffering people is to be really supportive and really listen to them.
Devil! He's the devil! He's the devil!
Be supportive and listen. You've never been in the emergency room when a woman is hauled in screaming because she thinks she's God and the devil's in her child. What should we do with her? Be supportive and listen?
We have to protect her child.
People. You leave here tomorrow, and after that you're on your own. And I still haven't gotten an answer. What will you do with the woman who thinks the devil's in her child? Tell her we don't want to label her so she's free to go? And what will you do? Will you lie awake nights? Will you worry about the child? I will.
Okay, you win. Am I tired of fighting? I give up. I won't say another word.
Don't, Harmony. Please, go on.
This really matters.
I was a cheerleader in high school and homecoming queen. During my second year of college, I married Eugene, my high school sweetheart. And then I got pregnant. And as soon as my tummy started to swell, he started getting drunk and beating up on me, calling me a fat pig and saying it made him sick to have sex with me. He left the night our daughter Tammy was born. It was hard being a single mother, working in the ribbon factory and trying to get my shape back. At the factory, I met Sam. He's a truck driver and he's gone a lot, but when he's home, he's wonderful. Funny, gentle, and a wonderful father to Tammy. I feel so lucky to have him, but I'm scared to death of losing him. He says he loves me, not for how I look, but who I am. I hope that's true, but I get so scared of putting on weight. It's weird. Sometimes the only thing that makes me feel better when I get scared of getting fat and losing him is eating. Like an entire chocolate cake or a whole pot of macaroni and cheese at once. Of course, then I get scared again right away and I throw up. My stomach hurts and my throat gets raw. I went to a psychologist, and she said I make myself throw up because I enjoy the pain. I told her I didn't, but she didn't pay any attention. She said now that I don't have Eugene around to hit me and call me names, I had to make myself suffer. I told her I hate feeling bad, but thinking about losing Sam was even worse than throwing up to try to stay thin so he wouldn't go. She wouldn't listen. And I didn't know it then, but she put in my chart that I enjoyed suffering, that I had a mental illness, self-defeating personality disorder. I found out because when Tammy was 4, Eugene suddenly showed up and went to court to take her from me. I'd stayed friends with his sister, so he found out I'd been seeing a psychologist. And they made her bring my chart to court. The judge sent Tammy to live with Eugene because I was mentally ill.
I think a lot about how long never is.
Just keep thinking. Not a real man.
I get to see her 2 hours every second Sunday.
By the time she lost Tammy, self-defeating personality disorder wasn't even in the DSM anymore.
Just because something isn't in the DSM does not mean it's not real.
So there are more mental disorders than the 374 that are in the DSM?
Certainly. The only reason self-defeating personality was taken out of the DSM was because a bunch of feminist agitators got a lot of publicity.
This is the man I looked up to all year.
They claimed it was a sexist disorder because more women got diagnosed with it than men. But it's a fact that women just get some disorders more than men. And that does not make us sexist for seeing that.
That category should have never been in the DSM in the first place. You know what this disorder is? It reads like good wife syndrome. It's things like putting other people's needs ahead of your own, which women are trained to do. Do it and you're mentally ill. Don't do it and you're a bad woman.
That could make you crazy.
I've been in this nursing home for 2 years now. I can't rely on my body to work the way it used to. Lots of pains. Sometimes pretty bad ones. Hardly ever get any visitors. When I first came here, they came a bit more often, but not much now. I think they feel uncomfortable. They want to cheer me up, but they can picture what this place is like when they leave. I got to feeling pretty down. The nurse would ask me, "Max, how do you feel?" I said, "How do you think I feel?" "How would you feel?" I was like counting for years and a damn good one. I've always been more comfortable talking about numbers and things than about feelings. They called in a psychiatrist. He asked me a bunch of ridiculous questions.
Max, what day of the week is it? Max, how old are you?
Then, get this, he asked me,
can you count backward by sevens from 100?
I said it was a damn foolish question. Ask me a decent one and you'll get an answer. He wrote in my chart that I had mental illness called paranoid personality disorder. He also wrote that I was depressed. He ordered electroshock treatments to get rid of the depression. The head of the nursing home brought me a form to sign, giving permission for the shock. I refused. She called the psychiatrist back in. And he said by refusing, I was out of touch with reality. Had me declared incompetent on the grounds I didn't know what was best for me. If you're declared incompetent, they can make you have shock treatments and other things against your will. I chose dignity over blind obedience. And for that, they decided I didn't know how to look after my own interests. Almost all my savings are gone now. Paid to the nursing home. I applied for legal aid, trying to get a lawyer to fight this shock treatment thing.
Not even one child.
Not really real.
So little time.
Not sure what will happen.
The government really should do something about this. See what your labels do? Deprive a man of his legal rights, his dignity.
Try this on. A 30-year-old housewife is cleaning her kitchen. Suddenly, her heart starts pounding wildly. Her mouth goes dry. She notices that, as she goes on washing, her symptoms subside. So she washes 16, 17 times. In the next 6 weeks, it happens 4 more times. The episodes are so terrifying that she washes more all the time. Her hands, faucets, light switches, trying to prevent the pounding heart and dry mouth from returning. She goes to a psychiatrist. He's read Freud. He says that she uses the vegetable sprayer at her sink because she has penis envy. That doesn't ring true for her. She thinks, what do I know? He's the expert. She tries hard to find signs of her penis envy. 6 months later, she's in no better shape. So now the doctor says she's over-controlled by her mother. She has to divorce her mother. Truth is, the woman and her mother have a terrific relationship. She divorces her psychiatrist instead. Feels relieved, but still has the heart-pounding episodes and is washing more all the time. In the next 25 years, she sees one therapist after another. Psychiatrist, psychologist, behavior therapist, and is put on one drug after another. One psychologist, highly recommended, says she has obsessive-compulsive disorder and insists that she make the 4-hour drive to a city each week for therapy sessions. She does so religiously, alone for years, determined to get better. One psychiatrist gives her LSD twice in a hospital because a little chemical shakeup might do something. She emerges each time, pale and shaking. Looking at her, we wonder what he said or did to her in there. She gets in the car and Dad drives her home. She goes in and washes the doorknobs. No one helps. She feels more and more ashamed as the labels pile up, but nothing changes. She's the world's best mother, but she cleans hours every day. She thinks she's a bad person, a failure, because she hasn't been cured by the experts. Today, the experts say the pounding heart and dry mouth was a panic attack. In some people, the chemical switch that causes your heart to pound gets flipped in them for no reason, or from mild stress. Had she known that years ago, she would have never started the cleaning rituals. But now, she can't stop.
We do the best we can with the knowledge that we have at the time.
Knowledge? Did you hear anything in that story about knowledge? What you heard was that knee-jerk labeling, mindless classifying, let's try anything treatments we hurled at her. They gave her names that carried no meaning, not even help. I became a psychiatrist to help people like my mother. And now I can see it's even worse than the good old penis envy days. Why don't we come clean and admit what we do is by the seat of our pants? What is not science, but art? Silence? That's it? She's a good woman. Maybe you'd have something to say if she were your mother.
Not my mother, but me.
It's a little late. Wait, Harmony. Dr. Mudge, what?
One day at Harvard Med School, I couldn't get out of bed. If my senior resident hadn't told me that I was clinically depressed and put me on antidepressants, I might not be where I am today. I might not be anywhere at all.
I didn't know. I'm glad you feel you were helped. But what about the people that antidepressants make more depressed? Or that try to kill themselves with their antidepressants? I admit it, I don't have all the answers. Drugs or therapy help some people, but I can't bear to see them hurt so many others. And for God's sake, you're a doctor. So you have some control over how you're treated.
We really don't know if we help more people than we hurt, do we? We're so busy turning patients in and out of here that we never take time to find out what becomes them after we're done treating them.
But we're not supposed to think about that. We're supposed to assume that because we say we're here to help, and because a lot of us want to help, we're supposed to assume that what we do works.
Yeah, that's right.
But what about the people that we do help?
I don't have all the answers.
Does not having the answers mean we can't ask the questions? And does not knowing everything about how to replace a system that hurts a lot of people, do you fall silent and watch the damage continue?
When I first came here, I believed in you. I wanted to learn from you because I thought you had the answers. And you do have some answers. For some patients with some problems, you're the best.
But I've seen you when you don't have the answers. And you do something anyway and pretend to know why.
What is the meaning of coming in here like this?
A friend of mine had to walk past this construction site every day. And each time the construction workers would yell out, "Hey girlie, whoa!" She felt mortified and ashamed, and she'd put her head down and just keep walking. Then finally one day, after they yelled at her, she walked back, looked one of them right in the eye and said, "You got something you want to say to me?" The guy looked kind of embarrassed, but he met her gaze and he said, "Yeah, you're pretty." When he looked her in the eye, he couldn't forget that she was human. That's why we're here. It's time that you looked us in the eye.
But I know you're human. I take antidepressants every day.
If it helps you, fine. But your success doesn't heal those who have been wounded. It doesn't bring back my Tammy.
Has anyone seen Max?
The orderly took him to 1A.
1A?
What?
1A is for shock treatments.
We know you talk differently about us when we're not here.
When we let other people decide if you're normal, we have no place. We have no words. We can't feel safe or free or proud.
When you look up into the night sky, you see lots of stars. Then, someone divides them into constellations, and forever afterwards, all you can see is Orion and the Big Dipper. It makes it hard to see, really see, one unique star as itself.
You destroy a star when you do not look at it. You do not see the star, and you do not see yourself. Do you remember the ancient medical dictum?
First, do no harm.